The eye. Everywhere. Everywhere in everything. Of course, I had to get rid of the eye.
As you may have gathered from the title of this video, I'll be making my personified version of one of my favorite Edgar Allan Poe stories. If you don't know already, Edgar Allan Poe was an American writer and poet. You may have seen him referenced in popular TV shows. If you're familiar with this specific story, then you know it involves an old man with a crazy eye and the narrator, the old man's friend. For my personified version of the story, I decided it would be fun to combine the two characters into one elegant psycho. Before getting too much in the details though, I'm starting off by prepping the body. Since these were film imprinted, I did my best to sand down and fill in those itchy spots where the supports were. I've been working on my own male BJD files for quite a while now, but only recently have I had the motivation to finish it. I've learned a lot about sculpting since the last time I worked on them, so even though I didn't have to start from scratch, my original male body definitely needed a makeover. Here you can see I originally thought I was going to paint him a normal skin tone, but then I felt like that color was a little too alive for what I had in mind, so I painted him again in gray. For that hole in his chest, I'm going to paint it black for now and we'll come back to that later. Let's move on to his face. If you're familiar with the channel, then you may already know that I've spent some time to sculpt him a unique face in Blender. Unlike his body, I did have to start from scratch for the head. I didn't mind though, because this actually will save me a lot of time for future projects. As you can see, I added elf ears, so that could be a hint. I'm adding wrinkles and making one side a little bit more sunken in to tie back to the old man in the story. Of course, this is the side where the old man's eye will be later. Moving on to painting his face. After doing a bit of blushing, I sketch out his eyes. It's actually a bit less nerve-wracking this time around since I don't have to worry about trying to make both sides of his face look exactly the same. Basically, I'm emphasizing the wrinkles and crazed look on the wide eye side and leaning more towards a sly look on the normal side. I've actually attempted the same idea on a doll before, but on a Rochelle Gold doll for Monster High. She was supposed to be the female personification of the story, but let's just say that project did not want to be completed. I still have the original face and I really like how it came out, so I'm trying to keep that same vibe and transfer it onto this guy. His eyebrows I did off camera because I can never breathe, let alone film during that part, so just imagine me painting those. I'm sure you won't be too far off. I'm using a slightly different method for the eyes this time. I'm going to be using gouache paint instead of acrylic, and I made the iris itself a flat surface instead of the usual sphere shape. The flat surface was a lot easier to paint on, and the gouache is just better to blend with. The only downside to gouache is that it's not waterproof, so it reactivates with water very easily. To fix this, I spray on 2 layers of MSC. This way, none of that paint will move when I add on the resin later. I did 1 pale eye and 2 blue eyes. The extra eye was just because I couldn't decide what blue looked better. I ended up leaning towards that brighter blue for the normal side of his face, and this is how he turned out. Now to make that hole in his chest a little bit more elegant. First, I'm going to make the heart that's supposed to go in it. With the help of this video, I'm going to be sculpting his heart by hand out of epoxy sculpt. To make the frame that I want to surround the heart, I'm going to be using a combination of these filigree silicone molds that I have. I mix up some more epoxy, and while it's still really flexible, I'm going to stuff it into the mold. I let it sit for around 30 minutes or until the clay hardens a little bit, and then I take it out and carefully form it to his chest. I do this until I have all the pieces I need for a frame. Jumping back to the heart. When it's all cured, I paint the heart blue and add washes and highlights to make it a bit more realistic. To finish out the frame, I paint the pieces black and then use my airbrush to spray on some owl-clad chrome paint. When everything is dry, I glue the heart to the center of his chest and the frame around the edges. For his hair, I'll be using some blue acrylic yarn. I cut the yarn into strips and then I unravel it. I pull each end and repeat until the two ends become too hard to pull apart. I found this method from this creator on Instagram, and I find that it makes longer hair wefts than brushing the yarn out with a pet brush. Taking my cute little mini flat iron, I straighten out all of the hair. If you don't have a flat iron, you can also just use a normal clothing iron, which is what I used to do. The mess finally begins, and I glue all of that hair onto his head. Now for his clothes. I'll be using these two fabrics along with some black velvet. To start, I just make a basic shirt out of the white fabric and some basic pants out of the velvet. There's plenty of videos showing how to do this, and I'll most likely show it again in more detail in a future video once I get better at sewing doll clothes. Because of that, I didn't see the point of going into too much detail here. If you're curious though, hopefully this animation helps. The vest isn't that complicated either, but because it's made out of a really pretty fabric, I figure I'd show more of the process. Basically, it's the same as the shirt, only the armholes are bigger and the front piece is overlaid to form that signature vest look. I also line these pieces so that it looks a bit neater. For some added details, I add some fake pockets and some chrome pearls to mimic buttons. With that, I can say he's done.
True, I'm nervous. Very, very dreadfully nervous. But why will you say that I'm mad?
He's definitely a character I can see myself revisiting in the future. 1, he was fun to make, and 2, I would love to see how much he could look different as my art style changes and I learn new techniques. Let me know what you think of him in the comments. With that all being said, I hope you have a wonderful Halloween, and like always, thanks for watching, stay sweet, and I'll see you next time.